Welcome back to another story on Whispered Tales. Now, let's dive into today's story. The House on the Hill. Part 1. The small house perched precariously on the hillside outside Puebla had stood for nearly half a century, weathering countless seasons of sun and rain. It had watched generations of sparrows build nests beneath its red-tiled roof, now faded and cracked with age. For Don Ricardo and Dona Elena, the house was more than shelter. It was a living diary of their lives, a sanctuary where memory and love intertwined to form warmth. Every morning, Ricardo maintained his ritual. He stepped onto the veranda and sat in the creaking wooden chair to breathe in the air. From there, his eyes stretched across the valley, the endless cornfields, the rows of green rolling into the horizon, and in the distance, the silhouette of the great Popocatépetl volcano, sometimes exhaling thin threads of smoke, a reminder of the eternal power of nature. For him, this view was a familiar melody, one he listened to daily yet never grew tired of. Elena, his wife, began her days tending the small garden in front of the house. She cared for the vibrant yellow marigolds, the bursts of bougainvillea, and the potted cacti crowned with purple flowers. Each stem, each leaf, each bloom was tended with devotion, as though the garden were her own child. For Elena, the soil and flowers were not merely decoration but an anchor, a way to hold on to gentleness in a world spinning ever faster. Inside the house, every corner carried a story. In the living room, their wedding photographs still hung on the wall, black and white, taken in 1975, Ricardo, then a young schoolteacher just starting out, and Elena, a radiant bride in a simple white dress. On a wooden shelf rested dusty schoolbooks, a few slim volumes of poetry, and an old radio that no longer worked properly, producing little more than static. Still, Ricardo liked to turn it on, as if searching for echoes of the days when he and his students once sang traditional Mexican songs together. The neighbors around the hill knew the couple well. They were not wealthy, but their generosity and warmth made them beloved. Ricardo was often seen telling stories to the village children, weaving lessons of ethics and kindness, while Elena was known for cooking large pots of stew to share with widows and the lonely during festivals. To the small community, the house on the hill stood as a symbol of humanity and memory. But life, as always, was changing. In recent years, news spread of a new highway project. People said the road would connect Puebla to Mexico City faster, bringing economic growth to the entire region. According to the maps, however, the route would cut straight through the hill where Ricardo and Elena's house stood. At first, they dismissed it as rumor. But then strangers appeared, men in pressed shirts carrying blueprints and measuring tools. They hammered red markers into the soil, scribbled notes, and left. Ricardo watched them with a quiet dread. At his age, he knew he no longer had the strength to fight the decisions of government or company officials. Yet in his heart, he could not imagine the day when bulldozers would flatten the home that had sheltered their lives. Elena too grew silent, staring into the distance from the veranda, her beloved garden threatened by the stroke of a bureaucrat's pen. In the evenings, when the valley glowed golden with sunset, Ricardo would recount old memories to Elena, as if resisting the encroaching fear. He spoke of the first time he brought her to the hill, when their home was only a small shack with a corrugated roof. Together they rebuilt it, one beam at a time. He remembered the lean years of teaching, when his salary was meager but his days full of laughter from children's voices. On weekends, they would gather in this house, cooking mole with chocolate, cinnamon, and dried chilies filling the kitchen with fragrance. Elena smiled at these stories. To her, the house was not simply brick and wood but a vessel for every milestone, the day their first son was born, the day they sent their daughter to school far away, the family reunions during Dia de los Muertos with marigolds bright on the altar. Every wall, every chair, even the cracks in the tiles, carried meaning. The house on the hill was part of them, just as they were part of it. To lose it would be to lose a piece of themselves. And so, in the fading light of dusk, the old couple sat side by side in silence, their hearts beating in unison, praying, perhaps in vain, for a miracle that would keep their home safe from the storm of change. Mornings on the hilltop house often began with the crowing of roosters from the nearby homes, followed by the drifting aroma of freshly baked tortillas from the small market down the road. For Ricardo and Elena, each day unfolded like a slow song, unhurried, yet steady in its rhythm. Ricardo still made his regular trips to the village market every Tuesday and Friday. Carrying his worn wicker basket, he bought corn, a handful of dried chilies, some black beans, and always a bag of freshly ground coffee. Don Luis, an old friend from youth, ran the coffee stall. The two would chat for long stretches, about harvests, local gossip, or news of the wider world. Ricardo most enjoyed hearing Luis reminisce about his younger days, when he performed mariachi music at town festivals. While Ricardo was away, Elena busied herself at home. She swept, cooked, and tended the herb patch where cilantro, onions, and oregano grew in neat rows. By the time Ricardo returned, lunch was ready, a plate of steaming enchiladas, a pot of bean soup. They sat across from each other at the old wooden table, their conversations flowing gently, circling around the weather, their health, and the children living far away in the cities. Their eldest son, Javier, had moved to Mexico City years ago to work as an engineer. He seldom visited, swallowed by work and distance. Their youngest, Marisol, had settled in Guadalajara with her own family. Elena often spoke of them, not in reproach but in quiet acceptance. She knew each generation must follow its own path. For her and Ricardo, it had always been this hill, the land, and the memories woven into its soil. One humid afternoon, Ricardo heard more concrete news from Don Luis at the market. The highway was no longer rumor. It was a confirmed project, construction scheduled to begin within the year. Luis unfolded a newspaper, a bold red line cut across a printed map, slicing directly through their hillside. Ricardo's hands trembled as he held the paper, the weight of inevitability pressing down. When he told Elena, she fell silent. She stared at her garden, where marigolds glowed under the fading sun. After a long pause, she whispered. "We've lived here all our lives, Ricardo. How can they erase everything with just one stroke of a pen?" Ricardo could not answer. He knew at 70 he lacked the strength to stand against governments and corporations. Yet the thought of surrendering their home was unbearable. In the following days, strangers appeared more frequently. Dressed in white shirts and hard hats, they carried survey equipment, planting small wooden stakes painted red into the earth. One morning, a group measured directly in front of the gate. When Ricardo confronted them, they offered no courtesy, only cold words, "We're working for a national project." They departed without a glance of respect. That evening, Elena cooked pozole, a dish usually reserved for celebrations. But the meal tasted heavy. Ricardo pushed the spoon through the hominy, unable to hide the weight in his chest. Across the table, Elena's eyes dropped to her bowl. The danger was no longer distant. It was already at their door. Still, they clung to their rituals of hospitality. On weekends, neighbors visited for coffee and conversation. Elena offered slices of sweet bread, and Ricardo told stories of his teaching days. Children raced around the courtyard, laughter echoing off the stone walls. In those moments, the house seemed to fulfill its purpose, a place of gathering, of warmth, of community memory. One morning, Elena's closest friend, Dona Teresa, arrived with a basket of warm tamales. As they ate, Teresa offered a cautious thought. "Perhaps this road will bring good, Elena. Jobs, prosperity for our children and grandchildren. Maybe it isn't all loss." Elena smiled faintly but said nothing. To others, the house might be a parcel of land, an obstacle. To her, it was life itself, the garden she had tended, the walls that had cradled every joy and sorrow. How could that be measured in money or progress? Ricardo, trying to ease her fears, spoke hopefully that perhaps the route would be adjusted, perhaps officials would reconsider. But he did not believe his own words. Every new red marker on the hillside deepened his dread. At night, unable to sleep, Ricardo often sat outside, gazing at the moonlight draped over the valley. He remembered his father's voice, "Land is the soul of family. You may lose money, you may lose work, but never lose your land." Those words echoed within him, igniting both fear and determination. Meanwhile, Elena began writing a daily journal. She recorded the smallest things, the first bloom of a cactus flower, a meal shared, the laughter of children. "If the house is ever lost," she told Ricardo, "at least the memory will remain." He looked at her, seeing in her eyes both sorrow and quiet strength. Seasons turned. Summer gave way to autumn rains. Trucks rumbled below, their engines groaning, carrying steel and gravel. Posters appeared in town, the highway, a new future for Puebla. The images of wide roads and shining lights meant little to Ricardo. To him, it was a stranger's dream, paid for by erasing his own. Back at the house, Elena touched his hand. They said little, but their silence held a vow: whatever came, they would face it together. The house was not just stone and timber. It was the vessel of their lives. And they would protect it, even as storm clouds gathered at the edge of their world. Autumn rains fell for days without end, drumming softly against the red roof tiles and soaking the fields below. Inside the house, Ricardo often sat by the window, listening to the rhythm of water, his heart weighed down with unspoken fears. Elena carefully carried potted marigolds indoors, protecting them from the chill, her silence more telling than words. What once felt like a haven of peace now trembled under the shadow of something larger than themselves. One morning, the roar of engines broke the mist. From the veranda, Ricardo saw convoys of trucks bringing steel and gravel, workmen hammering up signs that read, "Highway Project, for the future of Puebla." The presence of industry crept closer each day. No longer rumor, the change had a face, a sound, and a timeline. In the marketplace, conversation grew tense. Some villagers praised the project: new jobs, faster travel, a future for their children. Others, like Ricardo and Elena, feared the cost, the loss of homes, of memories, of the soul of their village. Friends who once gathered over coffee now sat in divided groups. One afternoon, Ricardo approached Luis. "Do you truly believe this road will bring happiness to all?" he asked. Luis avoided his eyes. "I believe in the future for our children. The past must sometimes be let go." The word stung. Ricardo did not blame Luis, but he felt as if part of his foundation had crumbled. Elena noticed the same shift. Neighbors who once greeted her warmly now avoided her gaze. Some muttered that she and Ricardo were selfish, blocking the prosperity of many. Elena carried the hurt quietly, choosing not to repeat it to Ricardo, knowing he bore enough weight already. Even within their own family, division showed. Javier phoned from Mexico City, his tone clipped. "Father, mother, take the money. Move closer to us, live comfortably. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Ricardo's voice tightened. "Son, this house cannot be measured in pesos. It is our life." Javier sighed heavily. "You're being stubborn." The line went silent. Marisol, the younger daughter, called soon after. Her voice was gentler. "I understand, Mama, Papa. Times are changing, but if you want to fight for the house, I will stand with you. Just be ready, it won't be easy." Elena's eyes welled with tears. At least one bridge remained intact. Through it all, Elena wrote faithfully in her journal. She recorded the rainfall, the rumble of trucks, Ricardo's furrowed brow as he stared out at the hill. She wrote of hope and fear woven together, of her garden's resilience, of laughter that still echoed when children played in the courtyard. "If one day this house is gone," she wrote, "let there be pages to prove that it was once alive, once loved." Then came the community meeting. The town hall overflowed with voices, heated and divided. Officials unfurled maps, spoke of economic benefits, promised compensation. Applause rose from one half of the room. Whispers of doubt stirred in the other. Ricardo stood slowly, his voice trembling but clear. We do not oppose progress. But progress must not come at the cost of memory. This house is not just mine. It belongs to our history, to the spirit of this land. If we let it be erased today, what else will we lose tomorrow? For a moment, silence filled the hall. Some nodded, eyes glistening with agreement. Others frowned, skeptical. The officials scribbled notes, but their expressions betrayed little. That night, under the weak glow of an oil lamp, Ricardo turned to Elena. I will fight, even if I am old. Not for myself, but so our children will know we did not surrender without a word. Elena clasped his hand firmly. We built this house together. We will protect it together. Outside, the rain fell steadily, washing over the hillside. Inside, two hearts beat in unison, their vow burning quietly against the storm of change. The first days of winter carried a sharper chill than usual, the wind rushing down from Popocatépetl and rattling the windows of the little house on the hill. Below, the noise of trucks and heavy equipment echoed through the valley, a reminder that the highway crept closer with each sunrise. One afternoon, a delegation arrived. Officials in dark suits sat stiffly at Ricardo and Elena's wooden table, laying thick folders across the surface. The oldest among them adjusted his glasses and spoke in a clipped, practiced voice. Don Ricardo, Dona Elena, your property falls within the zone of expropriation. You will receive fair compensation and relocation to a modern housing development. This is an opportunity for comfort in your later years. Ricardo's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, his voice steady but burning with anger. To you, this is land. To us, it is our life. What sum can ever buy memory? What price do you set for a soul? The official sighed, gathered the papers, and left with a final remark. You are making things harder for yourselves. The house fell into silence after they left. Elena touched Ricardo's shoulder, feeling the tremor in his body, not fear, but outrage and helplessness. Rumors spread quickly through the village. Some whispered that Ricardo was refusing in order to demand more money. Others said he was selfish, holding back progress. At the market, Elena heard these words like daggers, though she never repeated them to her husband. She carried the pain quietly, protecting him. Yet not all turned away. A few neighbors came quietly in the evenings, leaving fruit, beans, or firewood at the door, pressing Ricardo's hand and saying softly, "We understand. We just cannot speak out loud." Their whispers of solidarity warmed him even as sorrow lingered. That night, Javier called again. His tone was firm, frustrated. Father, mother, you cannot win. Take the money, move to the city. Be safe with us. Ricardo stared at the wedding photo on the wall. His voice was low but resolute. Son, whether we win or lose is not the point. If we surrender so easily, what will our children learn from us? Javier had no reply. The line fell silent. Later that evening, Ricardo confessed to Elena by the flickering light of a lamp, perhaps one day they will tear this place down. But I want our children to know that their parents stood tall. That we did not abandon dignity. Elena's eyes shone with tears, but her grip was strong. We built this house together. We will defend it together. And so, the couple made a vow, silent but unshakable, as the winter wind howled outside. The house was more than stone and timber. It was the witness to their lives, the cradle of their love. And though the storm of progress pressed closer, they would not yield without a fight. Part 2. That winter was colder than usual in Puebla. Snow lay thick upon Popocatépetl slopes, its icy brilliance reflecting the pale light of dawn. But for Ricardo and Elena, the beauty of nature no longer calmed their hearts. From their window, they could see columns of steel driven into the earth, machines roaring day and night. The highway was no longer a threat on the horizon. It was climbing the hill, step by step. At the marketplace, the mood had changed. Friends who once sat together sipping coffee now separated into two groups. One spoke eagerly of compensation, of jobs for their children, of the prosperity the road would bring. The other, smaller and quieter, whispered sorrow over the vanishing of homes and traditions. Ricardo felt the divide in every handshake, every half-hearted greeting. Luis, his old friend, grew distant. When Ricardo asked him one morning, "Do you truly believe this road will bring happiness?" Luis looked away. "I believe in the future for our children," he replied softly. "The past must sometimes be released." Ricardo carried those words home like a stone in his chest. Elena sought refuge in her journal. She wrote not only of daily chores but of the sounds that invaded their lives, the clang of metal, the drone of trucks, the heavy silence of neighbors afraid to speak. Each night, she read aloud to Ricardo, her voice steady even as her hands trembled. "If the world forgets," she said, "at least these pages will remember." Then came the letter, the official order of expropriation. Their house was listed in the first phase of demolition, 60 days from now. Ricardo crumpled the paper in fury, then smoothed it out again, laying it carefully on the table. He knew they must face what was coming. Elena stared at the ink-red stamp as though it were blood. News traveled fast. Some neighbors came to console, others looked at them with suspicion. Whispers swirled, that Ricardo was greedy, that he wanted more money. Elena bore the humiliation silently, unwilling to add to her husband's burden. But not all was darkness. One afternoon, Marisol arrived with her husband and children. The house filled with laughter again. Ricardo led the grandchildren through the garden, showing them the cactus blooms and the old wall where he had once measured his children's height. The children's eyes sparkled, their delight breathing life back into the weary house. That night, over mole and coffee, Marisol clasped her parents' hands. "I know this is hard," she said. "But you are not alone. We will help however we can." Ricardo felt warmth spread through him, a flicker of hope. Days later, a few neighbors came with a handmade wooden sign, "Save the house on the hill, our memory." They suggested hosting a community gathering, not to cause trouble, but to let voices be heard. Ricardo's throat tightened with emotion as he shook their hands. Elena wept quietly, seeing that their house was no longer only theirs. It was part of everyone's story. On Sunday evening, the courtyard filled with people. Children played by the marigolds, elders leaned on canes, young men and women held candles. Ricardo stood and told the story of the house, the day he and Elena laid its first bricks, the nights of Dia de los Muertos when the altar glowed with marigolds and candles, the afternoons when students came for extra lessons. Elena read from her journal. "Today I saw a cactus flower bloom. Small, fragile, yet proud in the cold wind. Our house is like that flower. Though battered by storms, it endures, because it is nourished by love." The courtyard fell silent. Then applause broke out, slow at first, then swelling into thunder. Ricardo looked around and saw tears in the eyes of many. For the first time in weeks, he felt less alone. Yet as he returned inside, a friend warned him quietly, "Be careful, Ricardo. Those in power do not like to be challenged." Ricardo nodded. He knew the path ahead would be full of peril. But when he looked at Elena beside him, her fragile hand still clutching his heart steadied. Beyond the walls, the night wind howled. But within, the oil lamp burned brightly, illuminating faces full of love and determination. The house on the hill, though fragile, glowed with the strength of a community's heart. The new year began with sunlight spilling gently over the valley, yet the air around the hill grew heavier by the day. Engines roared below, trucks carried stone and steel, and clouds of dust drifted upward, settling even on the marigolds in Elena's garden. Ricardo often woke in the middle of the night, staring out at the dark valley, where the glow of machinery flickered like restless fireflies. Elena, unable to sleep, kept her hands busy at the loom, weaving scarves with trembling fingers, as though each thread might anchor her in place. Rumors multiplied in the village. Some said the government would punish everyone if Ricardo and Elena refused to leave. Others whispered that those who supported them would end up on some invisible blacklist. Fear thickened the air, replacing the warmth of neighborly trust with suspicion and avoidance. At the market, Ricardo felt the shift in every glance. Friends who once clapped his back now only nodded stiffly, some turning away altogether. He carried the sting home, and Elena tried to soothe him with food and soft words. "Don't be sad, Ricardo," she said gently. "It isn't hatred. It's fear." Yet not all turned away. A small group of young men and women came to the house one evening. Their voices trembled with conviction as they offered to help draft a petition to the authorities. Ricardo knew the paper might mean little, but he agreed to sign. "Every voice matters," he told them. "Even if it is only a whisper." A few days later, the conflict moved closer. A team of workers arrived, measuring stakes near the garden gate. Ricardo stepped outside, gripping his walking stick firmly. "This is my land," he declared. "You have no right without a proper order." A young laborer, hot-tempered, snapped back, "Old man, all this already belongs to the project. Sooner or later, you'll be gone." Ricardo's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, the foreman pulled the young worker aside, muttering apologies. The group retreated, but the message was clear: next time, they might not. That night, as rain pattered against the windows, Elena whispered, "Ricardo, are you afraid?" He paused, then nodded. "Yes. But being afraid doesn't mean giving up." She clasped his weathered hands, feeling the tremor of both fear and resolve. News of the confrontation spread quickly. Some villagers shook their heads, calling Ricardo foolish for standing in the way of progress. Others secretly admired his courage, though they dared not say so aloud. Javier called again, his voice sharp with frustration. "Father, mother, I warned you. You cannot resist an entire government. You're making everyone suffer." Ricardo's reply was calm but unwavering. "We are not fighting the nation, Javier. We are protecting our home." The silence on the line cut deep. Afterward, Ricardo sat for a long time without speaking. Elena saw the sorrow in his eyes, the ache of a father misunderstood. Yet behind it, the flame of resolve still burned. Late that month, a landslide occurred during construction nearby. No one was injured, but rocks tumbled dangerously close to their gate. Workers came to clear the debris, one muttering with a smirk, "This is only the beginning. Better to leave now." Elena shivered at the words. Ricardo stood stiffly, staring at the broken earth. He felt as though time itself was crumbling around him. That night, by the fire, Ricardo spoke softly, "One day, perhaps, we may lose. But if we leave without trying, what will remain of our dignity? At least if we stand, our children will know we did not yield so easily." Elena's eyes glistened. She pressed his hand to her chest and whispered, "Then we will stand together." Outside, the night winds lashed the hill. But inside, the oil lamp glowed, and two figures sat hand in hand, fragile yet unyielding, ready to face whatever storm would come. By February, the winds from Popocatépetl grew fierce, carrying dust that clung to every crevice of the old house. The marigolds in Elena's garden sagged beneath the constant film of gray. Each day, the rumble of machines shook the ground, their roar a relentless reminder that the road was drawing ever nearer. One morning, two officials arrived carrying thick files. They laid them heavily upon the wooden table. Their voices were cold, practiced. "Don Ricardo, Dona Elena, this is the final notification. If you do not sign the expropriation documents within 15 days, the government will proceed with forced removal." Elena's face paled, her hands clutched at her apron. Ricardo met their gaze steadily. His voice was low, but unshakable. "We will not sign. This is our home." The officials gathered their papers, leaving behind only a warning: "You are making this harder than it needs to be." After they departed, the silence in the house was heavy. Elena wept quietly, while Ricardo sat staring at their wedding photo, remembering how it all began, two young lovers building a life beam by beam, stone by stone. Now, half a century later, that life could vanish in a matter of days. Word spread quickly through the village. Some accused them of selfishness, of standing in the way of progress. Others pitied them, but from a distance. Yet a few still came quietly at night, placing fruit or beans at the door, whispering, "We are with you." Their small gestures of solidarity warmed Elena's heart, even as the sting of gossip cut deep. Then, unexpectedly, hope arrived. Marisol returned with her children, and with news. A group of university students from Puebla had heard their story and wanted to visit. "They want to record everything," she explained. "To show that behind every project, there are real people." On the day of the visit, the courtyard bustled with energy. The students brought cameras and microphones, eager to capture the couple's story. Ricardo told them of his years as a teacher, of the early days when he and Elena built the first walls of the house, of nights filled with candlelight during Dia de los Muertos. Elena shared her journals, her voice trembling as she read aloud. "Today I watched a cactus bloom. Small, fragile, yet proud against the cold wind. Our house is like that flower. Though battered by storms, it endures, because it is nourished by love." The students listened intently, some with tears in their eyes. That evening, the first article appeared on the university's website, "The House on the Hill, a Memory at Risk." Within days, the story spread across social media. Journalists from local papers arrived, eager to document the struggle. For the first time, Ricardo and Elena felt their voices echo beyond the valley. But with attention came danger. One night, stones shattered a window. A note scrawled in rough letters lay at the doorstep, "Don't stand in the way of the future." Elena trembled as she read it, but Ricardo held her close. "They want to frighten us," he said firmly. "But fear cannot erase truth." The next morning, sympathetic neighbors arrived to repair the window. They spoke softly but with conviction, "We are still here, Ricardo. Don't lose hope." Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the volcano, Ricardo turned to Elena. His voice carried both weariness and quiet pride. "We may not win this fight. But if our story is told, if people remember, then this house will never truly die." Elena nodded, her hand finding his. "You are right. A house is not only brick and wood. It is memory. And memory cannot be destroyed." Outside, the machines roared. But within the house, the oil lamp glowed, casting light upon two faces etched with age, yet bright with love and defiance. Part 3. March arrived with the scent of freshly planted corn carried on the wind, yet peace eluded the hillside. From the veranda, Ricardo and Elena could see the road inching closer, machines lined up like an army of iron. Their growls and whistles filled the valley, drowning out the songs of birds that once marked the start of each day. Still, they clung to their routines. Elena brewed coffee each morning, sprinkling cinnamon into Ricardo's cup. He sat on the porch, watching clouds gather over Popocatépetl, though his gaze often drifted to the red stakes that crept higher up the hill, slicing deeper into the earth. Each stake felt like a scar. Then one morning, the local paper published a front-page story, "The House on the Hill, Stubbornness or Spirit of Preservation." The photograph showed Ricardo and Elena seated together, the house behind them and the construction fence looming in front. The article ignited debate. Some readers called them heroes, others mocked them as relics standing in the way of progress. In the village, pressure grew unbearable. Friends who once visited freely now avoided them, fearful of being branded troublemakers. Yet unexpectedly, new allies appeared. A group of students from Mexico City arrived with cameras, determined to document their story. "People must see the truth," they said. "Progress has a human cost." The couple welcomed them. Ricardo spoke of his teaching days, of children reciting lessons under this roof. Elena read passages from her journal, her voice trembling but clear. "This house is our memory," she said. "Every crack in its walls is part of our life." The students recorded everything, their eyes wide with reverence. When the film was released online, it spread quickly. Cultural organizations reached out with letters of support. Some promised to pressure the government to reconsider the route. Ricardo and Elena were astonished. For the first time, they felt their struggle was not only theirs. But hope was short-lived. Days later, an official letter arrived, stamped in bold red, "Demolition scheduled in 1 month." Elena's hands shook as she held the paper. Ricardo laid it on the table, staring until the words blurred. He knew, the moment of decision had come. At the town hall, conflict boiled over. Officials promised jobs, hospitals, schools. Applause rose from half the room. Ricardo stood slowly, his voice shaking but strong. "I do not fight against progress," he said. "But progress cannot mean erasing memory. This house is part of who we are. If we destroy it, what will remain of us?" Silence followed, then murmurs, then shouts. Some villagers scowled, others nodded with tears in their eyes. The meeting ended in division. That night, Ricardo sat long into the evening, tracing the cracks in the wall where he had once marked his children's heights. Elena sat beside him, placing her hand gently over his. "We have lived together half a century," she whispered. "Now, whatever storm comes, we will face it together." Outside, the machines roared, but inside, the lamp glowed softly. The old house, weary yet unbroken, stood as both shelter and battleground, its walls holding the weight of love, memory, and defiance. By April, the skies over Puebla turned bright and clear, but the village lay under a shadow. Trucks thundered past more frequently, and the hillside road seemed swallowed by dust and noise. To many, the house on the hill was no longer simply a home, it had become a dividing line in the community, a symbol some admired and others resented. Ricardo's trips to the market grew lonelier. Where once neighbors greeted him warmly, now some turned away, others muttered, "There goes the stubborn old man." He walked with head high, but each remark pressed upon him like a stone. Elena, too, felt the sting. At the well, a young woman said coldly, "Do you think you can save everyone? You'll only bring us trouble." Elena walked home in silence, the words echoing in her chest. Yet support did not vanish. Students and sympathetic villagers came quietly, offering food and encouragement. One evening, they arrived with pens and paper, helping Ricardo draft another petition. He knew it might change nothing, yet he signed with steady hand. "Even a whisper matters," he told them. Then one afternoon, the inevitable happened. A convoy of pickup trucks climbed the hill, carrying surveyors and guards. The leader, a man in a dark jacket, stepped forward. His voice was clipped, commanding. "Don Ricardo, we are here for final inspection before demolition. Cooperate, and things will be easier." Ricardo stood firm, his walking stick in hand. "This is my land. You cannot enter without lawful authority." The man smirked. "Authority has already spoken. You just refuse to see it." Elena stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "This is our home. Show respect." Some of the younger workers shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to confront the elderly couple. But the leader barked orders, and red stakes were driven into the soil at the edge of the courtyard. Elena gasped, clutching Ricardo's arm. He trembled, his anger and helplessness colliding. Word of the clash spread rapidly. Some villagers mocked Ricardo's defiance, calling him a fool. Others whispered admiration. That evening, a small group of youths arrived, pledging to stand guard if needed. Ricardo thanked them, but urged caution. "I don't want blood spilled for this house," he said. "I only want memory to be respected." That night, Javier called from Mexico City, his voice sharper than ever. "Father, Mother, you're humiliating yourselves. Stop this before it destroys everything. Ricardo's tone was calm but unyielding. We are not fighting the nation, Javier. We are defending our home. Silence stretched across the line, heavier than any argument. When it ended, Ricardo sat for a long time without speaking. Elena touched his shoulder, whispering, "They may not understand now. But one day, they will." The following week brought more tension. Strangers lingered near the house, watching, muttering threats. At night, Ricardo and Elena sat by the fire, the shadows long across their faces. Ricardo admitted softly, "Perhaps one day they will take this place from us. But at least our children will know we stood firm." Elena's eyes glistened in the firelight. She pressed her hand against his. "Then we will stand together. Whatever comes." Beyond the walls, the wind howled across the hillside. But inside, the house glowed with quiet defiance, fragile bodies, steadfast hearts, and a love that refused to bend. By May, the rainy season had returned. Showers turned the dirt paths into mud, and water pooled along the hillside. Elena's bougainvillea still bloomed red, but layers of dust dulled their brilliance. On the wooden gate, Ricardo hung a hand-painted sign, "This is a home, not a plot of land." One morning, a convoy of vehicles arrived, government trucks, police cars, men with loudspeakers. A stern-faced official stood at the gate and read aloud. "By order number 215, this property will be expropriated and demolished within 7 days. If you do not vacate, we will proceed with forced removal." Ricardo's heart pounded, but his voice rang steady, "This is our home. We will not leave." Elena stood beside him, clutching his hand. Her voice trembled, yet it carried through the courtyard, "You may break bricks and beams, but you will never erase memory." Some workers shifted uneasily. Journalists, already gathered with cameras, captured every word. The story raced through newspapers, across television, and onto social media. Images of the elderly couple standing before their crumbling house spread nationwide, accompanied by the caption, "Memory cannot be demolished." In the village, the divide grew deeper. Some accused them openly, "Because of you, we have no compensation, no jobs." Others came at night, leaving baskets of tortillas, beans, or candles at the door, whispers of loyalty carried on the wind. Marisol returned with her children, embracing her parents tightly. "We'll stay," she said, her voice fierce. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Elena wept in her daughter's arms, her fear softened by pride. Days later, the government organized a public meeting in the village hall. Officials promised prosperity, schools, clinics, paved roads. Applause erupted from one side. Ricardo rose slowly, his voice quivering yet clear. "I do not oppose progress. But progress cannot mean erasing memory. This house is not just ours. It is part of the soul of this land. If we lose it today, what will we lose tomorrow?" For a moment, silence. Then a woman stood from the back. "He is right. We can build a road elsewhere. Why destroy our past?" The hall erupted with argument, shouts of anger, cries of support. The meeting ended without resolution, leaving the community more divided than ever. That night, Ricardo and Elena walked the house slowly, touching each wall, each crack, as if memorizing them. Elena wrote frantically in her journal. "Tonight I hear not only machines, but voices, students, neighbors, strangers who care. Perhaps this house is no longer just ours. Perhaps it belongs to everyone who believes memory matters." The following evening, the courtyard filled with people. Students lit candles, neighbors sang folk songs, journalists filmed as the flames flickered in the night. Ricardo and Elena stepped outside, astonished by the crowd. Tears blurred Elena's vision. Ricardo raised his hands and said simply, "Thank you. You have made our house less lonely." Songs rose into the night sky, drifting across the valley, defying the thunder of bulldozers below. For a few hours, the house on the hill glowed brighter than ever, fragile, yet radiant, a beacon of love and defiance. But in the shadows, the threat loomed larger. Only 4 days remained until the appointed day. Part 4. June brought sudden summer rains, heavy downpours that swept through Puebla, leaving the paths slick with mud. From the hillside, Ricardo and Elena's house looked like a small island in a storm. The red tiles of the roof darkened under the rain, the cracked walls glistening with moisture, yet still the house stood, proud and unyielding. Pasted on the wooden gate was the government's notice, demolition scheduled in 3 days. Ricardo removed it carefully, folded it, and placed it on the altar beside the photographs of his parents. Bowing his head, he whispered, "Father, Mother, protect us. I have kept this home until the very end." Elena lit candles and placed a vase of marigolds next to the paper. She said nothing, her sigh dissolving into the thin smoke curling upward. The village buzzed with tension. Some brought quiet offerings, a bag of beans, a jug of water, tortillas wrapped in cloth, setting them down at the gate before slipping away. Others muttered that the couple was reckless, dragging the community into trouble. Ricardo heard the words but bore them silently. Elena tried to ease the weight by cooking carefully, as though each meal was a gesture of gratitude. "We must live kindly, even in our final days here," she told him. Marisol and her children brought light into the house. The children played in the courtyard, chasing falling bougainvillea petals, laughing as they tumbled into piles of damp leaves. Ricardo led them around the garden, pointing to the old stone wall where he had once measured his children's heights, to the corner where a long-gone dog had buried its bones. The children listened with wide eyes, as though inheriting the memory themselves. That evening, the family shared a meal together. Elena prepared mole, rich with chocolate, cinnamon, and dried chilies, the aroma filling every corner of the kitchen. Around the table, they ate slowly, savoring each bite. Ricardo raised his cup of coffee and said softly, "Whatever tomorrow brings, we still have each other. And that is what matters most." Marisol's eyes glistened as she nodded, swallowing back tears. Later that night, while the rain drummed against the windows, Elena wrote in her journal. 3 days remain. I do not know what will happen. But today I watched Ricardo smile as he told stories to our grandchildren. I heard their laughter in the garden. I saw the house glowing with life in the darkness. Perhaps that alone is enough for a lifetime. Ricardo read the entry, his eyes wet. He placed a hand on her shoulder. You write for the future. Even if the house falls, these words will live. The following day, students returned with cameras and small tents, vowing to stay until the end. Ricardo worried for their safety, but Elena served them coffee, the warm fragrance mingling with the damp air. If you are here, then you are part of our family, she told them. That night, neighbors gathered once more. Someone brought a guitar, and soon songs of Mexico filled the courtyard. The music rose with the wind and rain, blending into a hymn of defiance. Ricardo leaned close to Elena and murmured, "If they tear down the house tomorrow, then tonight is our last fiesta here." Elena rested her head on his shoulder, smiling faintly. Not the last. It is a celebration so the house will remember it once lived in joy. Songs echoed into the valley, rising above the distant growl of machinery below. For a few hours, the hill was alive with voices, candles, and love. At dawn, Ricardo stepped onto the veranda. Mist covered the valley, but through it he saw trucks lined at the foot of the hill. Figures in reflective vests moved like shadows in the fog. The day had come. He inhaled deeply and turned back. Elena stood ready, her journal in hand. Marisol clutched her children, her eyes wide with both fear and pride. Ricardo took Elena's hand. His voice was steady. They may tear down these walls. But they cannot take the memory from our hearts. Elena squeezed his hand, her smile trembling. Beyond the garden, the engines roared to life, shaking the ground. That morning, the sky was heavy with gray clouds, the air thick with dampness. From the veranda, Ricardo saw the convoy approaching, trucks, bulldozers, police cars. Their engines roared, tires grinding into the muddy road, the noise rumbling through the valley like thunder. Elena stood beside him, clutching her journal tightly to her chest. "They're here, Ricardo," she whispered. He nodded, inhaling deeply. He wore a clean white shirt, worn with age but neatly pressed, as though preparing for a final stand. Elena walked beside him, while Marisol held her children close behind. At the gate, students had already formed a human chain, holding banners painted with bold letters, "Memory cannot be demolished." A handful of neighbors stood with them, faces pale but resolute. Cameras clicked and whirred, reporters jostled for space. A man in a dark suit stepped forward, loudspeaker in hand. His voice was cold, amplified across the courtyard. "By order of the state, this property will now be demolished. Vacate immediately." Ricardo stepped to the front, his walking stick in hand. His voice rang clear. "This is our home. We will not leave." Elena's voice followed, trembling but strong. "You may destroy walls and roof beams, but you will never destroy our memory." The crowd stirred. Some workers shifted uneasily, avoiding the couple's gaze. But the official barked again. "This is your last chance. Leave, or we will use force." One of the students shouted back, "We are witnesses. The world is watching." Cameras lifted higher, recording every second. Ricardo turned to Elena, whispering, "Are you ready?" She met his eyes, tears glimmering but steady. "I've been ready since the day we laid the first brick." The official gestured, and a squad of workers advanced. They pressed against the line of students and neighbors. Shouts rose. A young man fell in the mud, Elena cried out, and Ricardo bent to help him. Marisol clutched her children as chaos rippled through the courtyard. "Violence against an old couple," a reporter shouted. "This is being filmed." The official froze. His eyes darted to the cameras, to the journalists scribbling furiously. If the demolition proceeded now, the images would sweep across the country in outrage. He hesitated, his jaw clenched. Ricardo spread his arms wide before the gate. His voice shook but carried like a bell. "Look at us. We are two old people. You may have power, but we have truth. You may crush stone, but not the spirit that lives here." The workers faltered. Some lowered their hands. The official cursed under his breath. And then, as if summoned, the skies opened. Rain poured in torrents, drenching everyone. Wind lashed across the hillside, scattering dust and papers, forcing the workers to retreat to their trucks. Thunder rolled from Popocatépetl, echoing like drums of war. Elena clung to Ricardo, her voice nearly lost in the storm, "Even heaven stands with us." The convoy rumbled back down the hill to wait out the storm. The students, soaked to the bone, raised their banners higher. Neighbors lit candles beneath the rain, their flames flickering but unextinguished. Ricardo gazed at the red roof glistening under the downpour, the house standing defiant in the storm. His heart swelled with a strange, fierce hope. Today, at least, the house had survived. The storm that morning seemed endless. Rain pounded the valley, sheets of water cloaking the hillside in silver. When the clouds finally broke, the trucks still sat at the base of the hill, their engines silent. The official stood watching the house, the cameras, the crowd. With a grim frown, he raised his hand, and the convoy withdrew. By afternoon, the news was everywhere, demolition delayed at the house on the hill amid public outcry. Photographs of Ricardo and Elena standing hand in hand in the rain flooded newspapers, television, and social media. Across Mexico, people shared the image with the caption, "Home is memory." The village, once divided, began to soften. Some who had opposed them now came with offerings of bread or coffee, murmuring apologies. Elena welcomed them warmly, her heart too tired for bitterness. She understood, fear had silenced them before, but memory was stronger. Marisol stayed, helping her parents clean the courtyard and record their story. One evening, Javier called at last. His voice was unsteady, unlike the sharp tones of before. "Father, Mother. I was wrong. When I saw your picture in the paper, I cried. I'm proud of you." Elena pressed the phone to her ear, tears spilling down her cheeks. Ricardo answered softly, "Son, winning or losing is not the point. What matters is that we live true to our hearts." Days later, visitors arrived from Mexico City, architects, cultural activists, professors. They spoke of preserving the house as a heritage site, a place where future generations could learn that progress and memory need not be enemies. Ricardo and Elena listened, their eyes wide with both disbelief and cautious hope. That evening, the family shared dinner by candlelight. Ricardo lifted his cup of coffee, his voice quiet but firm. "This house has done more than we ever dreamed. It has made people listen. Whatever happens tomorrow, we have already won." Elena smiled, a peace settling in her chest. She no longer feared the bulldozers. The house had stepped beyond its walls, it had become a story, a symbol. The next morning, the official notice was posted again at the gate. This time, it read, "Project suspended. Route under review." Ricardo's hands trembled as he held the paper. Tears ran freely down his cheeks. Elena embraced him, and for the first time in many months, they wept not from fear, but from relief. The village gathered that night with guitars and candles. Songs rose into the sky, echoing across the valley. The house glowed with light and laughter, no longer a place of dread but of celebration. In her journal, Elena wrote, "Today we learn that the house will stand another season, perhaps many more. But more importantly, it has crossed beyond wood and stone. It has become memory, and memory does not die." Ricardo read the words, closed the book, and gazed at the cracked walls and faded roof. He saw not weakness but resilience. Like himself, like Elena, the house was weathered yet proud. He took her hand and whispered, "This house sheltered us for a lifetime. Now, we have sheltered it. And it will protect our memory forever." Outside, the wind swept across the hillside, carrying the scent of wet earth and the laughter of children playing in the courtyard. The house stood firm, not just as a dwelling, but as a beacon of love, memory, and the quiet defiance of ordinary people refusing to be forgotten. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. See you again.